"Play it loud," the man cried. And they did this year, gunpowder and all. 12 years annually punctuated by a weekend of organised chaos is some record. I can't understand this idea that we're obsessed with spiky bits. Anyway, Games Day has never been dull. But the knowledge that this year's event would be 3 days long seemed to fuel everyone there with adrenaline. This year, we had the biggest tabletop fantasy battle display in the world, run by Tim Morley and Pete Naylor, and over 10,000 gamers visiting the hall, according to the event's organiser, Andy Jones. Certainly, the Games Workshop trade stands were overrun on Saturday morning. Mind-blowing, eh? This is the stuff of good Games Day reports. At White Dwarf, we have a responsibility to present this good side of gaming. It would jeopardise the whole standing of the hobby if we mentioned that when Tim Pollard announced that Tony Ackland and Carl Critchlow's raunchy wench drawing competition, it stopped all ground floor activity for several seconds, with the exception of the 100 or so bright-eyed fantasy art enthusiasts who dived for the stage. Sophisticated Steve Hand watched the event with interest, his only comment being, "Come on Sonny, show us your blister packs." That can have a bad effect on people's blood pressure. By the way, contrary to popular belief, it was only a water pistol that MC Tim Pollard was spraying over the crowd. Okay, so you really want to know what the event itself was like, don't you? Even if it entails us spoiling the entire image by whining on about Bob Avery chucking foam all over the place in a desperate attempt to hide the fact he hasn't got a clue about paranoia. Bob's game was a strange affair called Clone Day Surprise, and is currently being prepared for a future issue of White Dwarf. It wouldn't be so bad if he could leave it at the table. Oh well. That wonderful ice-breaking moment at the beginning of the White Dwarf seminar when Mike Brunton anointed his trouser leg with a pint of beer went down very well indeed. Not to feel outdone, Paul Cockburn revealed his true colours by failing to remember what this magazine is called exactly. It got the crowd on his side though, and Games Workshop currently have a vacancy in the PR department. Mind you, silver-haired PC managed to keep his brain in control of his mouth for the What is Games Workshop seminar, which left everyone in no doubt at all. However, as I suffer from a very bad memory, I would be grateful if anybody in possession of the correct answer could get in touch, thanks. Back at the hall, everyone playing the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay competition game was totally fazed by Basil Barret's Floydian floating pyramids that the bands of purple pygmies had to explore. To learn more, keep a lookout for a future White Dwarf featuring Baz's pun-slaughtering scenario, The Floating Gardens of Babylon. It's based on the future Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay supplement, Lustria. A reference to Warhammer has led to comments about Games Workshop's latest mind-bending addition to their growing family of games, Warhammer 40,000. Space Marines are literally the stuff of the future. So many people got hooked and grabbed their copies from the besieged Games Workshop publication stand that poor Rick Priestley came away shell-shocked. His universe just had a big bang. Hotel antics have led to several rumours that Games Workshop will be holding next year's event in either Birmingham or another country altogether. I'll take this opportunity to scotch these unfounded claims now, just because two of the studio's production team, Nick Ord and Dave Oliver for the Morbidly Curious, were under the impression that dairy products work best when applied directly to the skin. It doesn't mean they're sick. Anybody can make a mistake. Anyway, welcome back to Butter, boys. And finally, as usual, there are lots of people to thank for their cooperation. Top of the list come the various dedicated gaming clubs and societies who always give this weekend of mayhem so much colour. Running competition and demonstration games and squirting pump-action water pistols everywhere, the Players Guild for their Blood Bowl arena, Wayne Millard for running his excellent Warhammer battle, and David Kaufman for his eternal vigilance. The Hall staff, it's their busiest weekend, they must be suckers for punishment, caterers, contractors, St John's Ambulance, Games Workshop staff from all over the country for organising coach trips, and everybody else without whom this event just couldn't happen. Our very own Andy, I love it when a plan comes together, Jones, is said to be currently in a stable position. We'll ignore the casualties from our special exploding light bulb and soaking floor tricks, there weren't enough of them, and the fact that costume and Grizzly Bits designers Myhtlore nearly caused GBH to a security officer who happened to turn up to one of their adventures on the top floor. But anybody who didn't go missed the chance to see Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, Greg Stafford blowing all the RQ questions in Rick Priestley's quiz, John Blanche being conspicuously blasé about his Personality of the Year award, Bob Harris, Graeme Undead Davis, Phil, what's wrong with Spiky Bits then, Gallagher, Jim Bambra, Richard Halliwell, Steve Hand, Jervis Johnson's Groupies, Bill, Steve Tappin, Brett Ewins, Carl Critchlow, Tony, I'll just make these bits bigger, Ackland, Gary Chalk, Joe Denver, artist Peter Jones of Stormbringer and Dungeon Quest fame, and John Quaife. We'll just lie to you and say that everyone had a brilliant time. See you next year, by Sean Masterson. Here are the Games Day Award winners from 1987, as voted by the readership of White Dwarf. A few eyebrow raisers are hidden away in here somewhere. The best new role-playing game was Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay by Games Workshop. The best fantasy role-playing game was Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay by Games Workshop. The best other role-playing game was Call of Cthulhu by Chaosium. The best role-playing adventure or supplement was Death on the Reich for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay by Games Workshop. The best solo gamebook was Dungeon of Torgar by Joe Deaver. Best fantasy or science fiction board game was Talisman by Games Workshop. The best historical board game was Blood Royale by Games Workshop. The best family board game was Monopoly by Waddingtons. The best fantasy figures manufacturer was Citadel by Games Workshop. Best miniatures rules was Warhammer Fantasy Battles by Citadel and Games Workshop. Best professional games magazine was White Dwarf by Games Workshop. The best fanzine was Dagon by Carl Ford, and the best games personality was John Blanche for Suzuki or Games Workshop. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, then please be sure to like and subscribe, or even leave a comment. I always try my best to reply to them all. You can even now support the channel by joining the Patreon page, details of which are in the description below. Thank you again for watching, and always remember to drill your barrels.